Hello, dear learners. Hope you all are doing well and also keeping well. I am happy to meet you again and I welcome you once again to another interesting module. And the module will be on effective communication as part of the MOOC Introduction to Functional English. In the third week of this MOOC, we have been discussing various aspects of communication and communication skills where we have tried to understand that communication is a central part of our lives. Verbal and non-verbal, written or spoken, communication is essential to almost everything we do in our day-to-day lives. In this module, therefore, we shall mostly discuss what is effective communication, the skills of effective communication, and how to enhance the effectiveness of communication in our day-to-day lives. So, the main objectives of this module are to discuss what is meant by effective communication, to identify the barriers to effective communication, to discuss the different strategies of effective communication, and also to understand how to emerge as an effective communicator on the basis of the skills that you are going to learn. So let us begin with the question, what is effective communication? To answer that, we may begin with some examples of what we can call communication failure. Let us now look at some of the, some examples of communication failure. Rasmi mishandled some candidates for the job because she didn't know who she was to interview. Rahul apologized for failing to provide important information on time for a meeting. Lina justified why she could not do what she was supposed to have done. And Prakash is confused by what he heard. So these are some situations, and on the basis of these situations, we shall try to understand whether communication has failed or succeeded. While the issue or context in each of these sentences is different, there is something common in all of them. Each example is an illustration of some kind of communication failure because something was not said which should have been said, something was assumed that should not have been assumed, something was unclear that should have been made clear. Consequently, the communication process failed for Rasmi, Rahul, Lina, and Prakash. So what are the implications of a failed communication? Or how might each of the following issues affect the person who had asked all four of them to perform their respective tasks? The implication might be like the following. Rasmi perhaps mishandled an interview involving some internal job applicants. Rahul didn't perhaps have essential data ready on time for the meeting. Lina perhaps did not prepare the meeting room for which at the last minute the furniture had to be moved or the projector had to be fixed. Prakash didn't understand the point of the talk that he had heard. So, what are the possible consequences of such mess? Because this type of communication failure always takes place in our lives. Okay, so let us look at the possible consequences of such mess. One may be loss of time, loss of respect, loss of confidence, loss of credibility, loss of relationships, loss of trust, and so on. Any or all of the above could have serious consequences for you or for your organization. The above examples actually hint at some kind of miscommunications. However, contrary to this, what would communication success entail? Let us look at the same sentences to discuss communication success. And the sentences may be written like this. Rasmi interviewed all the suitable candidates. Rahul supplied all the necessary data on time before the client. Leena pre-arranged the chairs and tables for the meeting. Prakash understood the main point of the talk he heard. So, what are some of the benefits of successful communication? 1. People feel good. 2nd, people do their jobs well. 3rd, people work together. 4th, people feel motivated. 5th, people save time. 6th, people assume responsibility. 7th, people share information. 8th, people respect and trust each other, so on and so forth. So, the ability to communicate well and successfully is part of what we may call effective communication. It is an important aspect not only in an office setting but also in our private and social lives. Many people believe that they have very good communication skills and they are effective in whatever they communicate. But the truth is not so. Hence, successful and effective communication is a skill that can be learned. For effective communication, we must also note the different hindrances. Therefore, in the following, we shall look at some of those issues that might hinder effective communication. Let's look at all of them one by one. The message is confused or unclear. The choice of words, actions, or images is inappropriate. The transmission failed. The receiver did not get the message. The receiver misinterpreted your message. Therefore, examining and then practicing how to improve your communication with others should always help you all. Now, when we talk about effective communication, or once we have understood the meaning of effective communication, now let us look at the different barriers to effective communication. The main purpose of effective communication is to create a cordial relationship among the people in society or in an organization. Therefore, one should learn the various tips of effective communication. However, if one's intended communication fails, it could create problems among the people, causing harm to their personal relationships as well as to the organizations where they perhaps work. We should also understand that the tone of voice with which we speak is also an important factor for effective communication. We shall in the following look at some of those barriers that might lead to ineffective communication. Okay, so first I shall refer to the word criticizing. Criticism is an expression of disapproval of someone or something on the basis of perceived faults or mistakes. So, criticism of people might lead to defensive or rather aggressive responses. Though criticism is sometimes justified as a way of getting others to improve their behavior or performance, there are always some better alternatives. Secondly, labeling others. Labeling is the act of putting a label on something or someone. Often, labeling puts barriers between two peoples, which might result in creating distances among us. Third, praising evaluatively. Unrestrained praise is often dishonest. If a person has an unclear motive, it can also be manipulative, and the final result is often bitterness. Then the next one is ordering. Ordering means giving an authoritative instruction to someone to do something. If ordering is used with force, it will surely create resistance and anger on the receiver's end. Threatening. The term threatening means to have or possess a hostile or deliberately frightening quality of manner. Threatening has the same effects as ordering. It may cause someone to feel vulnerable or at risk. Next barrier is moralizing. It is the action of commenting on issues of right and wrong, typically with an unfounded air of superiority. Moralizing creates many problems, including resentment and increased anxiety. Next one is excessive or inappropriate questioning. Questions are unavoidable and valuable tools of communication, but when used excessively, they can also create boredom and unnecessary distance between two persons. Continuous advising. Advising is sometimes important, but when used inappropriately, it may damage the confidence level of the one who is advised. So, once we have looked at the different barriers to effective communication, we should now look at how to overcome those barriers and improve the communication process. We may adopt some of the following tips to overcome the barriers to communication or for fulfilling successful communication. The first is the precision and perception of the communicator. Some communicators are able to predict how the listeners will react to their message. They anticipate the listener's reaction and modify the message accordingly. They know where to be precise and where to be elaborate. While reading the response of the listeners, they also try to constantly adjust to correct any misunderstanding that might arise. Credibility of the communicator. Effective communicators must be believable so that the listeners can trust the information shared by them and can have faith in the substance of their message. Control and congeniality of the communicator. Good communicators can shape the responses of the listeners. Depending on the purpose and the situation, they can make you laugh or cry, change your mind, or even take action. They know how to maintain friendly, pleasant relationships with the audience. People are also willing to work with people like them. So now we shall discuss the different strategies of effective communication. The book, Effective Communication and Soft Skills, Strategies for Success, elaborately discusses what it means to communicate effectively and comes up with 4 strategies for overcoming the barriers and improving the communication skills. However, there are some other strategies as well, and we shall discuss all of them in the following. The first one is fostering an open communication climate. Encouraging people to be open and comfortable to tell what they really think and feel is part of what we call open communication. The communication climate of a family, the society, an organization, or educational institution is a reflection of its culture, the mixture of values, traditions, and habits one inherits from others or their superiors. Some institutions or organizations tend to block off the upward flow of communication to keep the subordinates under control, while some other institutions work hard to maintain an open communication climate. They encourage openness and honesty, and their employees also feel free to confess their mistakes, to disagree with the superiors, and to express their feedback or opinions. Giving your audience a chance to provide feedback is crucial in maintaining an open communication climate. Secondly, committing to ethical communication. If you want to know what your audience's needs are and what they expect from you, it is part of what we may call ethical communication. If you sincerely wish to satisfy the needs of your audience, you will have to communicate with good intentions and very high ethical standards. Finally, because you value your audience's time and make a practice of anticipating your audience's expectations, you create and process your oral and written messages effectively and efficiently, and also responsibly share information. Third, adopting an audience-centered approach to communication. Adopting an audience-centered approach or keeping your audience in mind at all times during the process of communication is very, very important. That shows that you really care for your audience and take every step possible to get your message across. Analyzing the audience or their needs requires just a few minutes. You should try to know as much as possible about the person or persons with whom you are going to be interacting in a meeting, in an interview, or over the telephone, via fax, at a conference hall, and so on. Because having the information about the audience enables you to tailor your thoughts to ensure that your message is received as accurately as possible. For this, you may consider the following questions. With how many people will you be interacting? Who are the people in the audience? To whom will your ideas be distributed? What is the audience's relationship with you and with each other? What does the audience already know about what you want to communicate? Is your message confidential? So these are some of the questions that you should always keep in your mind. Hence, your analysis of the audience should enable you to learn as much as possible about the individuals and their relationships with you. This can finally lead to clarity in the message to be communicated as well as to the success in the communication process. This can finally lead to clarity in the message to be communicated as well as to the success of the communication process. Fourth, creating and processing your message effectively and efficiently. Creating an effective message is difficult if you are unfamiliar with your audience or if you do not know how your message will be used. For instance, if you are writing a report and you do not know the purpose of the report, it is difficult to know what to say or what to write. Unless you know why the report is needed, you will be facing a real problem. You are thus forced to create a very general document in which people might show the least interest. Moreover, you should keep your messages as brief and as clean as possible. For instance, one page is easier to absorb than two or more. Remember that by highlighting and summarizing your key points, you help your audience understand and remember your message. You may also consider the means of communication you use most often. Telephone, informal chat, email, lecture, formal meetings, formal reports, informal reports, memos, fax, notes, photographs, spreadsheets, and whatnot. So deciding how to communicate your message will result in effectiveness in communication. Different means have different implications. Therefore, it is important to think about issues such as formality, the nature and size of the audience, urgency, emphasis, confidentiality, and so on when you determine how you are going to say, write, or do whatever you are going to convey. Then, the next strategy is to be a good listener. Poor communicators think that listening is merely the act of waiting for their turn to speak during a conversation. However, this is a serious mistake. Listening is so much more than that. It is a way of providing someone the chance to share their thoughts and ideas, to build emotional intimacy, and to show empathy. Becoming a good listener requires to develop your active listening skills. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, noted that when someone gives us the chance to talk about what has happened to us and how we feel about it, we start to realize the best way to change our thoughts and behaviors. Although taking advice from someone else can be useful, we are most likely to change for the better if we work through our problems ourselves. Being able to talk freely to an empathizing listener is one of the most effective ways of achieving this. However, we can practice to become a good listener by following certain tips. These are using non-intrusive verbal and non-verbal signals such as nodding or saying I see, I do understand, etc. to encourage others to keep talking. Allowing others to keep going until they run out of steam. For instance, if you are dealing with an angry or frustrated individual, they won't be able to think clearly until they have offloaded or finished everything that's there in their minds. Next, not interrupting with unsolicited advice when someone is speaking. I hope these tips will help you to become a good listener. The next strategy is being an inclusive communicator. A good inclusive communicator takes care not to offend an entire group of people based on their personal attributes. They do not make assumptions based on an individual's characteristics. Inclusive communication acknowledges and values the cultural or other diversities. Mastering this skill is increasingly important in the 21st century. Thanks to globalization, people from all backgrounds can now work and socialize together. Inclusive communication builds harmonious relationships between individuals and even boosts performance in a workplace. Next strategy is having a good command over your vocabulary. The richer is your vocabulary, the more accomplished you can be in communicating complex ideas. Someone with a wide vocabulary can tailor their oral and written communication to a range of audiences and make productive relationships with them. A wide vocabulary also allows you to absorb the information from complex sources, which provide the tools you need to improve your personal and professional skills. The last strategy may be understanding how different generations communicate. Think about the people you work with or the people in your social circle or family who are from a different generation. Do you feel equally at ease with people much older or younger than you? Such an understanding will definitely help you in the communication process. So, the American Management Association has provided a list of the essentials of good communications. They are popularly called the 10 Commandments of Good Communication. Let us look at them one by one. By systematically thinking through the message and considering who will be receiving or affected by it, one of the basic pitfalls of communication, that is the failure of communication that we discussed at the very beginning of this module, can be resolved. The more systematically a message is planned, the more clearly it can be communicated. By examining the true purposes of communication, the communicator can determine what he or she really wants to accomplish with the message. Taking the entire environment, physical and human, into consideration, questions such as what is said, to whom, and when will all affect the success of the communication can be addressed. The physical setting, the social climate, and past communication practices should be examined in adapting the message to the environment. Next one is consulting with others can be a useful method of obtaining additional insights regarding how to handle the communication. The listener will be affected by not only what is said, but also how it is said. Voice, tone, facial expressions, body language, gestures, soft skills, etc. all influence the listener's reaction. People only remember things that they are beneficial to them. In an organizational setup, the officer or the boss must solicit feedback in ascertaining whether the subordinates understand what is communicated, or they are willing to comply with it or take appropriate action. Communication should be made with the future as well as the present in mind. Most communicators are designed to meet the demands of the current situation. However, they should be in accordance with the long-term goals as well. Supporting words with deeds is another important way to communicate effectively. Subordinates are always cognizant of the behaviors of the higher-ups and quickly withdraw from them. Lastly, be a good listener. By concentrating on the speaker's explicit and implicit meanings, the manager or the boss can obtain a much better understanding of what is being said. Dear learners, I hope you like the information being shared in this module. So, now we come to the end of this module. In this module, we have learned that communication is essential to all human beings. There are several barriers to effective communication, such as criticizing, labeling, diagnosing, ordering, etc. These barriers block the communication process, which results in problems in communication or even communication failure. Successful communication have some common traits such as accurate perception, preciseness, credibility, controlled emotions, and congeniality. Fostering an open communication climate, committing to ethical communication, adopting an audience-centered approach to communicate, creating and processing your message effectively and efficiently, listening attentively are some of the main characteristics or strategies of effective communication. Effective communication skills are therefore fundamental to all relationships, and one can learn these skills through practice. Hope you like this video. By refining your speaking style, improving your mediation skills, and becoming an attentive listener, you will surely succeed in any workplace. I'm sure the ideas on effective communication you have received from this module shall always help you to become effective communicators in different contexts of your life. See you again in the next module. Happy learning.